Welcome to Press Coverage. I'm Theo Gremminger. At Press Coverage, I want to bring you the sharpest guests and help you find the angles to help you win in fantasy football. And right now, it is rookie season. We got to dive into this 2024 rookie class, whether you're preparing for your Dynasty rookie draft, whether you're in early best balls, whether you're just a redraft manager that wants to know as much as you can about this class. Today, I'm happy to be joined by a first-time guest in Press Coverage, Brett Whitefield of Fantasy Points. Brett is dropping fantastic data-driven and also film-driven analysis on the 2024 draft class. He's got some different rankings than some people that you might have been listening to or paying attention to early in the offseason. So I'm really excited to get Brett on today in Press Coverage for the first time. How are you doing today, Brett?
I'm doing awesome, man. Thank you so much for having me on the show. This is going to be a treat.
No, for sure. And you know, like we have a long period of time between the Senior Bowl and the Combine, and then we get this massive data dump where we finally know certain measurements on players. We see them in drills. We see the 40-yard dash time for certain players. We see the vertical, the bench press, you name it, whatever your takeaway is. This is a two-part question. Do you think that the Combine helps you in your process, or it can kind of mess people up in their rookie evaluations?
So that's a really good question. I think ultimately, if you've been doing this long enough, you get a disciplined eye, there shouldn't be too many surprises at the Combine. I mean, it's not to say that there won't be any, for sure. Like, there are definitely some surprises, but ultimately, like, you know, we knew Xavier Worthy was fast. I even cautioned people in my Combine preview article to, like, hey, this guy's going to run really fast. Let's not double count it. Let's not triple count it. It is what it is. Let's stand on the evaluation we have for Xavier Worthy before he runs the ridiculous 40. We know he's going to run. And so from that standpoint, it's like you really shouldn't be making rash decisions based on what you see at the Combine. The flip side of that is what I personally love the Combine for is it gives you a glimpse into who out there is grinding and working hard. And I think that's such an invaluable part of the NFL draft that, like, you and I, we don't get a glimpse into a player's life. The Combine might be the closest thing to it. We get to see how they prepared for the biggest job interview of their life. And it sounds cliche and tacky, but I actually think there's some merit to that. It's like, well, a guy who performed really well that we didn't expect to perform well, that's a glimpse into, hey, this guy went out there, he got after it, and he got better. I think that's a good thing. So ultimately, though, I try not to make too many, harsh judgments just based on what we saw in the underwear Olympics.
Which position? I had this conversation this week with Heath Cummings on his pod about how I love seeing the athletic testing numbers for running backs, because I think that there's a connection between athletic testing numbers and draft capital at the running back position. And when I'm looking at my top fantasy scorers, you can usually see the running backs, and predict the guys who were drafted on day one and day two. Certainly there's going to be some outliers throughout the seasons like Kyren Williams, Aaron Jones, but most of the time, running backs, it's day one and day two guys. This past year, I believe 11 of the top 13 PPR scorers were day one and day two. Is there a position that you put athleticism into context a little bit more heavily than others?
Yeah, absolutely. Running back is a good example, but that's not my number one. Tight end is my number one.
Yeah, there you go.
Like, there's no position in the NFL where athleticism correlates to success better than tight end. In fact, I don't know, depending on what athletic metrics you use, RAS is probably the most popular right now, so I'll stick with that. I think out of the last 30 years, there's been one 1,000-yard receiving season from a non-elite RAS tight end. One. That is absolutely mind-blowing. So, tight end, hands down. There's one position that I'll elevate a guy just because he tested well, and it's tight end.
Yeah, I love that answer. I think that's probably the logical answer. And actually, this year, it's funny. We're going to dive into tight ends a little later in the show, and we're going to hear Brett's top tight ends in the class. But we had Brock Bowers weigh in at 245, so that was like a big weight off the shoulders of. And for a lot of the Brock Bowers is 235 haters out there, that one gets put to bed. But then we had all these tight ends run 4.65 or lower. So like you said, it's definitely makes this class a little bit more interesting. How about a player, Brett, that gained some value for you over the course of the Combine, if any?
So it's tough to say because my previous spiel about not making
it's
too
okay.
much
You can still we'll give you a pass. You can still keep your grounded philosophy, and there can be a guy that gained.
Yeah, I think that. So a guy that I was really hoping would check the boxes and did was Blake Corum.
Yes.
He's my number one running back in the class. I was a little unsettled with that going into the combine because coming off the MCL and meniscus surgery after the 2022 season, he just definitely didn't look like the same player for like the first 9-10 games of 23. Anyone that watched those games wouldn't disagree with me. And then all of a sudden he kind of kicked it into high gear to end the season. He finished really, really strong. So I was just kind of hoping he was back to himself. He ran, I thought it was a good 40 time frame at 4.53, but the agilities were really impressive. The shuttle, the 3-cone, that's really where his game is that short area quickness. So for him to check those boxes, obviously he's hitting the weight room too with the 27 bench reps.
Oh, yeah.
For me, I like he solidified himself as the RB1 in this class to me.
He had a video last summer at Michigan where he did 30 reps. This is a guy who likes to be in the weight room. This is a guy that takes care of himself. Like Brett said, we're seeing the guys that are really putting a lot into it. That's a significant number for a running back, especially in the day and age of a bunch of guys opting out of the bench press, not like the old days where they all would test in it. How about a guy, Brett, that maybe was a little less athletic than you thought, or maybe didn't look good in drills you anticipated they would look good in, that maybe lost a little bit of value for you this weekend?
Yeah, so there's this is twofold. Keon Coleman, to me, I thought his tape suggested he'd run a little faster than 4.6. That was one of the ones that surprised me. He has some real bursty moments. Think back to the LSU game to start the year last year. Like, I think he caught a ball, on like a slant route and took it to the house after making a couple guys miss. He just looked very fast on that play. Definitely more of the build-up speed variety than I would say quickness. But for him to run in the 4.6s or whatever, that was a little disappointing. But then he went and shined in the drill portion of the event.
Gauntlet King.
Gauntlet King. And there are very few drills at the combine where I really hang my hat on. Like, we learned something about that. Gauntlet might be one of them. Keon shined in that. So it's like, while he did, kind of disappoint me as far as his testing numbers go, I thought he looked great in the gauntlet. He definitely looks the part when he's out there running.
Now, this is not on the show sheet, but I had this conversation with somebody earlier in the week. The gauntlet is not something that's been around for like 20 years or something. This is not like a predictive thing. But last year we saw Puka Nacua, who I know you were very high on throughout the process, Brett. Big hat tip to you for that one. Now you got to just do it again. So we saw Puka Nacua run very fast miles per hour time during the gauntlet. We've also seen some guys like Garrett Wilson kind of struggle in the gauntlet. Do you think that as we get a little more data with the gauntlet and miles per hour testing, that miles per hour in the gauntlet is going to be something in like 5 years that we're continually referencing? Or do you think it's a little bit more of a niche thing that maybe doesn't weigh in as heavily as, I'm predicting?
No, even just watching the broadcast, Theo, like, I got the vibe that that's the direction they're going to push it for sure. It's good. I think if you listen to everything Daniel said all weekend, Daniel Jeremiah, that is, you can tell teams care about that more than the fan watching the combine does. So I definitely think it's something that, we might be citing a player's miles per hour in the gauntlet in the next few years. Puka's a great example. Ultimately what the drill really does for me is it shows guys that are comfortable with their play speed. That reactionary time while running near full speed I think that's really important. So when a guy has to kind of cheat it and go slow and can't stay on the line, it gives you pause about how he feels about his play speed. Play speed is better than time speed, obviously. But when there's gaps in the film, maybe you can use an event like Gauntlet to kind of fill some of those gaps.
Now let's give us a player that you think is a little bit under the radar. Now, certainly nobody's really completely under the radar now because we're getting the big data dump. But who's the guy that maybe you thought people would be talking about a little bit more this week that is not getting that sort of vibe?
I mean, you know who I'm going to say, right?
I know who you're going to say, but keep a little bit of gas in the tank for later in the show. But go for your guy. Plant your guy.
All right, Ricky Pearsall.
Yeah, there you go.
Guy. I mean, he had just an exceptional combine. I mean, one of the top 10 most athletic wide receiver combines ever. I mean, crazy. Now, I will say that even surprised me as a Ricky Pearsall guy. That kind of surprised me. But everything from the vert, the broad, his 40 time was really, really good. Like, yeah, that's my dude. I can't believe we're still, what is it, March 7th today? March 6th today. And not enough people are talking about Ricky. I mean, the tape is awesome. The tape is really, really good. Then he goes to the combine and does that. I thought for sure he'd be one of the artificial risers of the combine, but I guess not. I guess we're still waiting for that moment.
Yeah, and 4.41, and he had the third highest vertical. And like you said, this is a guy that had a near 1,000-yard season at Florida. Again, a transfer from Arizona State. We'll kind of see where he falls in your wide receiver rankings. But I just drafted a 2-round three-round Superflex mock draft with Cody Carpenter, and he went 20 overall in Superflex. So I think he's rising up. There is a little bit there's some people some pretty sharp people that are really on Ricky Pearsall this year. And I think he's kind of gotten lost in the shuffle of a deep wide receiver class, but he seems like the kind of guy, Brett, that's going to land in the second round of the NFL draft after those testing numbers, with third round as sort of his floor. Was that how you're seeing his draft capital?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I have a first round grade on him, to be clear, but yeah, I think if you look at prospects that are similar to him over the last few years, I think second round is probably where he goes.
Yeah, and we talked before the show, and anybody who knows me, I'm not trying to talk about defenders, and we'll talk a little bit, offensive linemen once in a while. But my main question for you is, we have a really strong class of offensive tackles. We also have a really strong class of wide receivers. Off the show sheet question, do we see more offensive tackles or wide receivers selected in round one?
Oh, shoot.
Off the cuff. I'll go wide receivers. I'll be team wide receiver on that one.
So my mock 2.0 I put out after the combine. I think it dropped Monday. I think I have 7 receivers going and 6 offensive tackles. Now that is what I would do mock, though. So that's the caveat there. So I don't know if the NFL agrees with me or not. I would say they probably don't. Man, that is tough. I'm going to say wide receivers. That might not be the same 7 that I have going in the first, but I think we'll get 7, 8 wide receivers in the first round.
Yeah, and I love that you said that. I predicted we're going to get 8. We're going to break a record. I think that's the way the league is going. I think having wide receivers starting for you on a first contract is a massive advantage when you start seeing these second contracts these stud wide receivers are getting. But it's going to be a fun draft for fantasy football because you have the quarterbacks, you have multiple wide receivers, Brock Bowers, and all these offensive tackles. You might have the least amount of defensive players drafted in the first round in quite some time. So that'll be very cool. But one team that people are looking at as the nuts landing spot, or one of the top landing spots for wide receiver, is the Los Angeles Chargers. Nobody was in love with the Greg Roman hire, but he's not a dummy. Greg Roman's had some good offenses in the past, and we have Justin Herbert, a quarterback who we've seen have success at the NFL level. They have Keenan Allen, over 30 years old, Mike Williams maybe on his way out the door, and Quentin Johnston, who really failed to deliver last year. So it's a spot that's ripe for one of these top wide receivers to land in. But is this going to be a Harbaugh and the Chargers eschewing wide receiver and sort of letting us down? What way would you bet on that domino falling in this NFL draft?
I think it's safe to say that Jim Harbaugh is the most stubborn man in football. And so if I had to bet, I would bet on him building this with his identity, and that's going to be offensive line, right? I mean, especially we don't know how the Keenan Allen, Mike Williams thing is going to play. There's a chance they move on from one of those guys, obviously, to save some money. If I had to bet, though, I would say they go offensive lineman, barring trade back maybe. And then maybe they bring in like a Hollywood Brown to reunite him with Roman, or even a Darnell Mooney to give some speed element to that offense. But I think they probably do the receiver thing a little on the down low and then go tackle with that first pick.
And then is the third round Los Angeles Chargers running back selection like maybe the most exciting running back landing spot, Brett, right now?
Yeah, it's going to be Corum or Marshawn Lloyd. We know that, right? It's like we don't know which one, but it's definitely going to be one of those guys. That's
going to be a guy that's going to steam up in our rookie drafts. We're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we're going to dive into these 4 positions. We're going to find Brett's rankings. I'm going to drop some of my rankings. We're going to get you ready for your rookie drafts and get you started on your NFL draft evaluation.
Now, I know many of you are looking for a secret weapon for your Dynasty League, and I have it. It's called the Dynasty Dominator app. You go to the App Store, go to Google Play. It's right there. It's $5 to download, and then every year it's $5 to load the next incoming class of rookies. You can add Superflex, add tight end premium. It's incredible because it allows you to look up players. It allows you to vote on whether a player is a buy, hold, or sell, and then see the market sentiment on that player, and you can compare their lifetime value rating from Player Profiler to their Dynasty ADP at the FFPC, all in the price lookup tool. And beyond that, we have a trade analyzer, so you'll never lose another Dynasty trade again. And in our settings, you can set this is a win now team, this is a rebuilding team, and then we let you compare players. Look at their metrics side by side, prospect metrics, NFL metrics. It's all there. It's $5 in the App Store. There's some add-ons for Superflex and to buy the upcoming rookie class. Every year, you're going to spend $5 on this thing, and it's going to be well worth it.
Welcome back to Press Coverage. Theo Gremminger with Brett Whitefield of Fantasy Points. Brett, a couple, maybe 2 months ago, I see some tweet you drop, and Fantasy Points drops the tweet, and it's listing your top quarterback as JJ McCarthy. And it's funny because I think there was an initial, like, what is this guy thinking? What is this guy thinking? And then now there's been a slow drip of a lot of people sort of coming around on JJ McCarthy. First, it's, you know, he had to have a little bit of resistance to establish himself as QB4. That became very apparent sort of after the Senior Bowl to most people. And then it's been a slow drip of this fantasy analyst seems to really like JJ McCarthy, this one. And now there's rumors that he goes as high as 4 overall in the NFL draft. It seems almost a sure thing that he goes inside of, let's call it the top 15, if not higher. What are the traits that JJ McCarthy has displayed to you that makes you view him as such an elite talent, not only a good quarterback, but a quarterback who could be special at the NFL level?
Yeah, so I like breaking this down into two buckets, and I like defining both buckets clearly. So you have what we call floor, traits that make you a high floor player, and then you have ceiling, traits that make you a high ceiling player. I think typically with quarterbacks, when you talk about guys with high floors, typically that comes with the expense of ceiling, right? So Kenny Pickett was called a high floor guy, but he has no ceiling. The reason I'm so in love with JJ McCarthy is I think he gives you the high floor without sacrifice of the high ceiling. And from floor, the floor traits I'm talking about is like his ability pre and post snap, playing in that pro style offense. You're not finding a quarterback in any draft recently that has the experience he does, getting his team in the right play call, getting his team to the right run call, getting his pass pro into the right spot. All those pre-snap stuff, the diagnosing coverages against the pro style offense, and then post snap, dissecting those coverages, understanding where to go with the football, getting to his second progression, getting to his check down efficiently, playing within the structure of the offense, accuracy to all 3 levels of the field, velocity on the football. Those are the high-end floor traits that give him a really, really high floor to me. On top of that, he's a winner, and I know people laugh at this all the time when I say it, but the NFL absolutely cares about winning. There's been one 1-0-1 quarterback drafted in the last 15 since 2009 and it was Jared Goff actually since 2009 that hasn't been within 1 game of a national championship. JJ McCarthy's the only one in this draft class that checks that box. The other ones don't even come close. So you can go down the list: Matthew Stafford, Sam Bradford, Andrew Luck, Jameis Winston, all the way down the line. Everyone but Goff was within 1 game of a national championship. So I do think winning matters. JJ's a winner. Obviously, we have the volume concerns everyone wants to throw in my face. It's a little concerning, the lack of experience, but when you actually put it in context of the dude didn't play in 9 quarters of football this year. He threw 1 pass in 2 third quarters because they were up by so much. He sat in 7 fourth quarters. So he has a lot of time missed just from winning.
I think what's interesting too, when you dive into JJ McCarthy, is they've been in such a game flow that he was never really asked to have to do too much. Yeah. Made some clutch throws against Alabama when it mattered. You think about that. But if you go back to that TCU game where they were playing from behind, his final stat line was awesome. Yeah. So, I think in certain situations, he would have put a lot more fantasy points and just stats overall. And what I find interesting about JJ McCarthy is when you dive into that 2025 quarterback class, I think I like him more than any player in that class. Are you prepared to give that statement on the 2025 class as well?
Oh, yeah. This class is 400 times better than the 25 class. So, and that's, I'm lower on Caleb than most. I would still put Caleb one overall there. I'd put Drake Maye 1 overall there as well. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let's dive into Caleb, because I've made a statement that I think Caleb Williams is one of the most can't-miss quarterback prospects since Andrew Luck. You are high on Caleb Williams, but maybe not quite as high as some. Want to share your thoughts on Caleb, Brett?
Yeah, for sure. So can't miss is definitely not a way I would describe Caleb Williams, because I think there's a lot of things that are required to play quarterback in the NFL that he just doesn't do at all. Playing within the structure of an offense, he really struggles with that. He is an improviser, and some of these creative elements is what makes him special. Obviously, he's a phenomenal creative player. The arm talent is legit. I think he's going to have to do a tremendous developmental arc with knowing how to use that creativity effectively. Something that drives me insane watching his tape, Theo, is like they'll have double bubble screens called. They'll go empty set, 3x2, double bubble, and literally that is the design of the play, and he will turn down both bubble screens in order to improvise. That is going to drive every offensive coordinator in the NFL insane. You can't do that. Like you literally can't do it, especially when both of them are wide open too. You just and that happened all the time. The carelessness with the football happens all the time with Caleb. It's mostly the out of structure stuff though. Like he just doesn't know how to operate and function in an offense. That's really scary. That's a staple of Lincoln Riley, by the way. I had the same complaint about Baker Mayfield. I had the same complaint about Kyler Murray, the same complaint about Jalen Hurts. Obviously some have worked out to varying degrees, but I do think Caleb is on that like Johnny Manziel, Zach Wilson spectrum where you see the raw talent there. It's a really a matter of developing that. Like, Baker's had a really nice career arc. I think Kyler's, minus the injuries, been on a decent career arc. So I think he's in that vein though, of like really slow trigger, slow to process, but elite physical traits that's going to carry him.
Where do you see his rushing upside as a pro? Because I've seen some mixed thoughts on this. Do you see him as the guy that's going to give us at least that healthy rushing floor, Brett, on a weekly basis in fantasy?
Probably not, because I think in order to be that guy, you have to run QB run game through.
Would you call him an opportunistic scrambler at the next level?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's probably Patrick Mahomes plus.
Okay,
somewhere between Mahomes, Allen. I know Allen gets a lot more rushing touchdowns, but so I'm not a fantasy guy by trade. So if I just contradicted myself with the first statement, then I apologize. But I don't think he's not a guy though you're going to run QB run through. You're not going to design QB power. Not a lot of read option opportunities with him. It's not Justin Fields. It's not Lamar Jackson. It's not Jalen Hurts. So, but I do think he gives you a nice floor from a scrambling standpoint, creativity standpoint.
What about Drake Maye and Jayden Daniels, two guys that right now are favored to go at the second pick in some of the Vegas odds? Your thoughts on those two guys?
Yeah, so I currently have Jayden Daniels as my QB3. And I think what really impresses me about Daniels is he is the perfect example of what development can do for a quarterback. I think when he left his age 21 season, there wasn't a single person in the planet that thought that guy was going to be a top 10 pick in the draft. Now it seems to be consensus opinion, or at least it was, maybe fading at this point, but I'm not sure. But Daniels, from a whole, he has gotten better every single year as a starter, and I think that's really impressive to me. And I know he's older than the other guys, but the fact that he has the track record of development is good to me. I think that's a good thing, not a bad thing. Two things he does really well. Obviously, phenomenal runner of the football. When you talk about, that rushing floor, I do think that's a guy you're going to run some QB type run stuff through, whether that's, read option, maybe not QB power. He is a little bit thin in the frame, but and then elite downfield thrower outside the numbers. You put him in the right offense where you can get vertical. I think that, it sounds crazy, but like Tennessee would be such a good fit for him with Callahan's there. I mean, that offensive, vertical throwing game would just be awesome for him. But anyways, Daniels, I think he's great. He definitely isn't a perfect prospect though. He's, inaccurate short part of the field. Ball location's not great. He has trouble attacking the middle of the field, especially against too high safety looks. He got better at that as the season went on. I want to say it was Mississippi State game, week 7 or 8. He hit a couple seam balls, hit a deep crosser right between two safeties. You did see some development, again, track record there of him developing. He got a little bit better at that as the year went on. So those are things he'll have to get comfortable with, though. He does not like throwing into tight windows. That is for sure.
How about Maye?
Yeah, so Maye, a lot of the issues I have with Caleb, I also have with Maye. The problem is Maye isn't quite the pure raw talent that Caleb is. So Caleb can hang his hat on the fact that I can outthrow any safety. I can put the ball exactly where I want it on any throw I want to. He's a little bit more athletic as well, where I think Drake's rushing production is a little more forced. Think about Sam Howell, 2 years ago, had 1,000 yards rushing in the same jersey that Drake Maye did. I think that offense just kind of dictates the quarterback does that. The other thing with Maye is his mechanics are a little inconsistent in the pocket. I think it leads to a lot of accuracy lapses. He was really inconsistent in 23, especially throwing the ball. Even a lot of completions downfield, the ball location just isn't ideal. These are little things that matter in the NFL. So, a lot of yak left on the table because he didn't get the ball in the right spot. I think that stuff really matters.
Is Michael Penix in the mix to be a late first-round pick, or do you think that's a little bit aggressive?
No, he should be for sure. I'm not a huge Penix guy, but I'm a huge quarterback guy.
Yeah.
I think quarterback is by far the most important position in the league. I think everyone would agree with me on that. It's so valuable that I would throw darts on guys I didn't even believe in if I was a GM of a team, just because you have to. You have to. I think Bo Nix and Penix should both be in the first round discussion firmly, just because the track record. You can make the argument Penix is the best pure thrower in the class. I personally wouldn't make that argument, but I've heard very qualified people make that argument, and he definitely has some pretty throws on tape. So
it's certainly a guy that the combine helped himself at the combine in terms of the measurements with the hand size, the wingspan, the little bit eye opening on the hand size. I think NFL teams really weigh that heavily because of the potential to be effective in bad weather. So that was good to see. All right, let's rank them, Brett. You go first. Your top 5 quarterbacks in this class.
Yeah, my 5 are JJ McCarthy, followed by Caleb Williams, Jayden Daniels, Drake Maye, and Bo Nix as my 5. Now, the lone caveat there is these guys are tight for me, by the way.
Sure.
I'm not saying it's JJ and you're crazy if you think it's Caleb. These guys are tight for me. So,
do you think that Nix and Penix that you would basically put them in their own little mini tier?
Yeah, there's a drop off after Maye for sure.
Okay, cool. So for me, it's Caleb Williams as my QB1, Jayden Daniels QB2. I love the rushing upside for us in fantasy. Drake Maye at 3, JJ McCarthy at 4, and then I'm going to go Michael Penix at the 5. So we're 4 out of the 5, exactly the same. Interesting one to dive into. Now let's talk about the running back position. The running backs had a very good day at the combine. We saw a number of players end up with very strong speed scores. We saw a couple of backs that we wanted to perform well, do well. You brought up Blake Corum running the 4.53. We saw Marshawn Lloyd. We saw Jalen Wright. We certainly saw Trey Benson really, really help themselves out. And then there was a couple of smaller school guys as well. But one guy that I want to get your thoughts on that I know you're a little bit higher on than consensus is Ray Davis. And anybody who hasn't dove into Ray Davis, really interesting player, played at 3 colleges, goes from Temple to Vanderbilt to Kentucky. He has back-to-back seasons with double-digit rushing touchdowns in the SEC, which was, pretty stand-up stat. And then last year he had, correct me if I'm wrong, Brett, we had 7 receiving touchdowns as well for Davis. He runs a 4.52 40. Tell us a little bit more about what intrigues you about him as a prospect.
Yeah, so for me, I come from PFF as my background. I was there for 7+ years. The famous running backs don't matter moniker, right? So that's kind of ingrained in me. And it's not that I don't think running backs matter, but I think there's a certain type of running back that, does matter. And Davis is that type of running back. For me, he's a pass game weapon. He's not a guy who can be good catching the ball or effective on checkdowns. He actually is a guy you can scheme it up for and say, hey, we're going to get a mismatch with Ray Davis and we're going to go exploit that. He has some of the best route running for a running back I've seen at the college level in a long time. I think he had 7 targets over 15 yards downfield this year, which is crazy for a running back. So I think, to me, that's it. It's like, you want a guy you can, especially, where his draft capital investment, like the requirement to get him is not going to be very high. You're going to get a guy that you can line up, get favorable matchups against linebackers and take advantage of that.
And I know you gave us Blake Corum as your RB1 in the class. Let's just go around the horn. Quick thoughts on Marshawn Lloyd, who had a fantastic Senior Bowl, 220, 4.46, 40. This is a guy that's definitely ascending. We joked about the Chargers in the 3rd round, but I think he's going to go in like the top 75.
Yeah, so Gosh, Marshawn, I love him. I think he's a really good prospect. I've comped him to DeAndre Swift very much. The first time I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. But the way he moves, like that super violent lateral cutting ability, it's got Swift written all over him. And then down at the Senior Bowl, Theo, he went down there with very little track record as a pass catcher and dominated the one-on-ones. And listen, I know those drills are designed for the pass catcher to win, but he was winning so bad that they actually called safeties into the group. Like he beat up every linebacker thoroughly to the point where they had to go across the field, grab a couple safeties, say, hey, can you try to cover this guy so we can get a good look here in one-on-ones? And he dominated them. He beat one on a wheel route 30 yards downfield. So really, really impressive as a pass catcher. I wish we would have got to see more of that on tape. But if the Senior Bowl is good for anything, it's for showing us, adding context to things we didn't yet know about. So for the same reasons I love Davis, I like Lloyd. I think he's an underrated pass catcher at the next level.
Yeah, and I love his story. Anybody who hasn't dove into his story, he was from Middletown, Delaware, and would drive 2 hours each day to high school to go to DeMatha, who, if you're on the East Coast or in the DC area, Baltimore area, DeMatha is one of the best high school programs in the country. So he had to leave Delaware to get exposure, and then goes to South Carolina, but turned down some bigger offers, and then ends up going to USC to play with his high school rival, Caleb Williams, same high school conference. So really, really cool. Just like the Roman Wilson flying, every day to go to his high school. We love seeing these guys, end up making the NFL after putting that sort of work in. Very cool stuff. Talk to me a little bit about Jaylen Wright, because there's some polarizing opinions right now. Some say, this is a guy with no vision. Others say this is a home run threat that can thrive in the right offense, and he's going to get the draft capital. He's very fast, Brett. Your thoughts on Jaylen Wright?
He is very fast. He's fast and explosive. And again, we're talking about the things I value in a running back. Explosiveness is one of them for sure. I will say the vision stuff, though, is real. And I want to quantify this better than I would say most people do. I think vision gets thrown out as a catch-all term, and it isn't a catch-all term. So like playing running back in the NFL, everything about it is paradoxical. A paradox is, two opposing truths that exist in the same reality. With Jaylen Wright, he doesn't yet quite understand how to live in that paradox. So like, for example, as a running back, you need to be urgent and press the line of scrimmage, but you also have to be patient and wait for your blockers. You need to force a linebacker to commit from his spot, but you also can't overcommit yourself. You need to be light on your feet, but you have to put your weight behind you and keep your weight behind your pads. So all these little paradoxes and nuance to what vision is. Jaylen Wright just doesn't quite grasp that yet. It's not just about getting to the right hole. It's about getting to the right hole with the proper leverage. It's about getting to the right hole while also moving that linebacker off of his spot so you have a clean access point. He really doesn't understand any of that. He ran against mostly 5- and 6-man boxes his entire career at Tennessee. So I think it's going to take development. We saw it, though. Like Jahmyr Gibbs is a great example. He didn't have great vision at Alabama. He wasn't the most patient runner in the world. There were elements of vision that worked for him, but in terms of that whole paradoxical lens I just gave you, Gibbs really struggled with a lot of elements of that. So I think Wright, that's someone he needs to watch a lot of tape of, at how Gibbs developed this year towards the end of the year, because Gibbs turned into a guy with exceptional vision towards the end of his rookie season. So. But yeah, that said, I value the skill set he has, and I think if a team is willing to bank on his development, then yeah, let's do it.
Do you think stylistically an NFL team is going to look at him because I've seen the Kamara references because of the college, but I don't think that's really a fair or good comparison. Do you think that teams are going to use him like they would a Devon Achane last year? Is it that sort of high value touch running back, or do you think that teams are seeing him in different lights?
Yeah, I don't see the Kamara thing either, to be honest with you. Kamara had a lot of really good tape of him as a pass catcher and pass protector. You don't have that with Wright. So I think that's jumping the shark a little bit with like I had a top 50 grade on Alvin Kamara that year, actually. So like I definitely don't have that for Jaylen Wright. But yeah, A-Chain's probably a good example. I know Wright's built a little bit bigger than A-Chain is, but as far as like getting him in the right scheme, like maybe an outside zone scheme where he can really use that speed to his advantage. Now, if he's got bad vision, outside zone might not be the best thing for him, because it's all going to come down to his vision to maximize that. But yeah.
And then last one running back I want to pick your brain on is Trey Benson. Benson had a fantastic combine. 216 pounds, runs a 4.39 40, much like Lloyd and right. He gets that outstanding speed score. And if anybody doesn't know what the speed score is, it's just a weight-adjusted 40 time, essentially, but it's been predictive of fantasy success.
Yeah.
A lot of our big contributors in fantasy are getting those 110-plus speed scores. And, Benson athletically now kind of compares a little bit to Ken Walker, Breece Hall, those sort of guys over the years, a little lighter than Jonathan Taylor, but an identical 40 time. Didn't have the greatest season for Florida State. I think he left, some people wanting a little bit more. But for me, this combine has me really, really excited about him. Your thoughts on Benson?
Yeah, so I really, really want to like Benson. When I watch his tape, there are moments where you're just like, woo, this boy can play. Like, this dude is good. Ultimately, what I came back to, and the reason I didn't go overboard with his grade, is he is a little stiff. Like, and that's not a deal breaker. In the right scheme, that might not matter. Like, Derrick Henry is a little stiff, and he runs through. Nick Chubb is a little stiff, and yet, he's who he is. So, like, that doesn't necessarily bother me. I just think, he's a little more scheme dependent than maybe people are letting on. I do think maybe there's some untapped potential as a pass catcher there. He shows natural hands, in my opinion. So, with that stiffness, maybe he's not out there running wide receiver routes from the slot or anything, but, as a design target from the backfield, I don't see a problem with that. So I really like Benson. He's going to be definitely in my top 5 when it's all said and done.
Okay, so any other running backs that you want to share your thoughts on, a Braylon Allen and Jonathan Brooks, or want to just lay out your rankings?
One guy I'll mention, and this is, for deep dynasty players, Dylan Lobby, New Hampshire running back.
Long Island, that's where I live. I'm rooting for Lobby.
Nice.
And Lobby had himself a nice combine, Brett. It's like everything we lacked with Bucky Irving. We get a pass-catching back who was 206 pounds, runs a low 4.5, looks really good. Okay, yeah, so go ahead. All the hype you want for Dylan Lobby.
Yeah, so Lobby, first thing, so I got to the Senior Bowl this year. He was a late replacement for somebody, and he showed out at, practice day 1. I was like, who the heck is this guy? I hadn't even heard of him yet. Go back to my hotel, immediately pull up Lobby tape. I fell in love with it so fast. I was late for dinner because I ended up watching 8 games of Dylan Lobby. And one thing that stood out is when they played, it was Central Michigan, I think, this year. And New Hampshire's not a good football program, by the way. So
it's almost a fake. I know what you're going to reference. It's almost a fake scoring line. When you say it, somebody's going to Google it. They're going to be like, Brett has this one wrong.
Yes, exactly. So, and this is a running back, by the way, and they go play Central Michigan, and New Hampshire's head coach made the decision. The only chance we have to beat this MAC powerhouse Central Michigan is if we give Dylan Lobby as many high-value touches as possible. So they played him at wide receiver for most of the game. He had 12 catches for, 295 yards?
Yes, 295.
12 catches for 295 yards and a couple scores. And they only lost that game by 3 points and had a lead in the fourth quarter, all because of Dylan Lobby. So from that game on, I was hooked. And the fact that he was real, game plan, interchangeable like that. They play him at receiver some weeks. They play him at running back. Like, I think the very next week, Theo, he had 30 carries on the ground. So he went from being an alpha dog wide receiver to a 30 carry running back. That's crazy to me. That pass catching skill set, though, is so valuable to me. I think you're looking at a, potential Danny Woodhead type guy here. So I love it.
I love it. I love the Danny Woodhead mention too. Very cool stuff. Give us your top 5 running backs right now, Brett.
Yeah, let's so Blake Corum is my 1, Marshawn Lloyd is my 2, Trey Benson is my 3, Jonathan Brooks, we didn't touch on him, as my 4, and he would be higher for me, but the ACL is troublesome, mostly because I don't know the NFL teams will value him as much, given the fact they have to sacrifice basically his most valuable season. And then Jalen Wright is currently my RB5.
Yeah, and for me, it's Trey Benson at the 1, Blake Corum at the 2, Marshawn Lloyd at the 3. Much like you, I would have Jonathan Brooks probably RB1, but I do have concerns he's going to fall to day 3 because of the injury. I'm still going to give Braylon Allen the benefit of the doubt, put him at RB4. But if he doesn't run it at Wisconsin's Pro Day, or at least a decent number, then I'm going to severely adjust that. I'll go Jonathan Brooks at the 5. I'll go Jalen Wright at the 6. I snuck an extra one in there for myself. I'm the host here. I can do that. So let's go to wide receiver here, Brett. You gave us Ricky Pearsall. I love that. Talk to us about Malik Nabers. Do you view him as a player that's very close to Marvin Harrison Jr. at the wide receiver 1, or are you kind of pumping the brakes a little bit when it comes to Nabers?
I'm pumping the brakes on that for sure. I do think I I do think he's an excellent prospect, and he would have been clearly my wide receiver one last year. But one of the things that's really boosting him, especially in the fantasy community, is his production profile, that analytical profile. And when I really dove into that, especially when I confirmed with tape, it's a little fraudulent actually. The production profile is fraudulent. So I'm not sure how X's and O's savvy the listener base is, but I'm assuming you guys are all high level. So as you guys know, in college, the number one deployed coverage is quarters defense. You get 2 high safeties. What that means is that those safeties are both relating to the number 2 on their respective side. And so what happens is a guy like Nabers, who's uber talented, gets put in the slot. He gets really free access into the second level, gets passed off to the safety. And basically now what you end up with is Malik Nabers in a one-on-one scenario with a flat-footed safety who's just praying to God Nabers stops his route. And inevitably Nabers has like a 2-way go or a slot fade, and he just runs right by the safety because there's no safety in college football that can stop, even average wide receivers from destroying them in this scenario. This is the biggest exploit in college football right now. We've seen other prospects like Wan'Dale Robinson, Elijah Moore. Who's the other? There's another one that just dominated on this type of stuff. Amon-Ra St. Brown's another one, and he's actually panned out for the good. So, but it's a big exploit in college football. Nabers, like 80% of his big plays in college came in this exact scenario I just laid out to you. Now, he does have some reps of him winning on the outside, but what you'll notice really quickly, when he is on the outside and he's going one-on-one against a talented cornerback, that separation just really dwindles down just a little bit. And he's still winning. It's still good. A lot of it's contested, though. I'm just not sure he's being sold correctly. And I do think he's a great prospect. That is the caveat. But I don't think he's close to Marvin Harrison Jr.
So, if we're talking about Dynasty rankings, he's a guy that we moved inside of our top 12 overall in Dynasty along with Marvin Harrison Jr. You would push back on that sort of valuation for Malik Nabers from a full-on NFL perspective, Brett?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Okay, that's fair. You got a lot of people depressed throwing out some of those names when you're talking about your evaluation for a guy like Nabers, who's steamed up inside of the top, 30 picks on Underdog right now as well, to give you an idea. Let's also talk about Rome Odunze. Quick thoughts on him. 6'3", 212, profiles like an alpha wide receiver one. He's going to get the draft capital. Are you excited about Rome Odunze?
Yeah, I love Rome. He's my clear wide receiver 2 in this class. So I guess if we're having a debate about Nabers, it would be, is he more on Odunze's level or not? But man, Rome is the real deal. Big physical X receiver that can play in the slot, just expert route runner, precise, knows how to play with tempo, great at the catch point, great after the catch. There really isn't anything he can't do. And I think the league is starving for a new injection of good X receivers. We haven't had a draft with a lot of them in a few years. And I think Drake London was the last truly good X receiver prospect. So I think the NFL is going to eat up this guy and the other X receivers like him.
And then how about one guy that, we talked a little bit about Xavier Worthy earlier in the show, but there's one guy that is also steaming up from Texas is Adonai Mitchell. Runs a sub 4.35 40, measures in well, tests very, very well. I did not anticipate that sort of speed. I thought he'd be a 4.5 guy. So definitely a win, but you're pumping the brakes a little bit on Adonai Mitchell.
Yeah, I'm from the standpoint of like you just said it, you anticipate him being more of a 4.5 guy. And that's why I'm pumping. It's let's not he doesn't show 4.35 or 4.34 anywhere on his tape, right? That surprised everybody and for a reason. So I would be shocked, I guess, if the NFL just all of a sudden elevated this guy to a first round status because he ran faster in the 40 than people thought. I don't think the GPS numbers on him were that good either. So we'll pump the brakes there. I think Adonai's a good player. I have a late second round grade on him. Player comp, I go styles, not ceiling floor. So when I watched him, he reminded me of Josh Reynolds from the formerly of the Rams, now with the Lions. Real good possession, savvy route runner, really good at on back shoulder type stuff. I think he's good on in-breaking routes, can sink his hips really good and explode. I don't think he has that the dynamics to get open downfield consistently in the NFL.
No one gets excited about really realistic comparisons, Brett. We don't want to hear that. We want to hear the upside comparison. So
Yeah.
Josh Reynolds, that's going to pour a little cold water on the Adonai Mitchell hive right now. And then lastly, one guy that steamed big time. You saw him down at the Senior Bowl. He had a fantastic combine, and certainly the slow drip from fantasy football, Ladd McConkey. Your thoughts on Ladd? How excited are you about him as a prospect?
Yeah, I love Ladd. Ladd is ready-made. He's ready-made, NFL ready. Drop him in an offense, he'll be awesome. If you're Kansas City or Buffalo, looking desperately needing to add to your wide receiver room, let's do it. Ladd he's a separatist, is a term we've coined at Fantasy Points. He thrives on separation, all levels of the field. What really strikes me about Ladd is he's got more juice than I think people realized, and he proved that at the combine. He ran a really nice 40 there. He's got explosiveness. The precision in the route running, though, is really key for me. If you can separate, I don't necessarily care about the other stuff as much because you're moving the chains for your offense. So,
yeah, it's like you said at the combine, the comparison with Garrett Wilson athletically, like he's almost cut and dry, very similar in terms of a lot of the metrics. Okay, Brett. Oh, and one more wide receiver I know you're high on is Roman Wilson.
Yeah,
guy runs a 4.41, had a huge Senior Bowl. The 4.41 was a little disappointing for some people that thought he would get he was the guy that was talked about being like a 4.3 flat guy, but certainly didn't lose any value at the combine. He's been an ascending guy for fantasy, much like Ladd McConkey. Your thoughts on Wilson?
Yeah, so the more disappointing thing for me on Wilson is that he didn't do the short shuttle or the 3-cone because he was supposed to set records. I don't know.
What's up with that? That because I read that as well, that the Michigan people said that the combine record was like in play. This is a guy that's been a workout warrior. He was on the freaks list. He was the guy that they have the plyo steps at Michigan, which it's basically like a steps in your house, but like 4 times higher. And they do these drills on them. And Wilson set like all sorts of records on those things. So you think that he was banged up or something?
I'm wondering. I know Bruce Feldman verified his short shuttle time himself over the summer. So like that wasn't, Michigan mystique, as I like to say. So I don't know. It makes you wonder when you he didn't flop the 40, but he ran a little slower than we thought he would. And then he doesn't do those events. He kind of makes you wonder if maybe he tweaked something, pulled something. Anyways, that said, I love Rome. I think he is more quick than he is fast, but he's another one of these guys who's ready-made. Like he can drop into an offense. He does literally everything. He's great after the catch. He's exceptional at the catch point, especially for his size, and I think that's a big winning point for him. Reminds me a lot of Stephon Diggs from a play style standpoint.
I love that.
Especially a younger Stephon Diggs, not the guy we saw last year. But
that's what we need, Brett. We don't need like the low side comp. We need the upside comp. And that's the first time I've heard anybody say Stephon Diggs with Roman Wilson. I love that. And that just opens my mind up. I think he'll end up being a 2nd round pick in the NFL draft when it's all said and done. And we're going to see so many wide receivers selected. I mean, you and I are both saying we're going to be right at the record for the 1st round. And then when you start diving into the 2nd and 3rd round wide receivers, we could set records in terms of day 1 and day 2 combined. That being said, the depth of the class is still going to push a few guys down. Who's the guy that you anticipate being drafted on day 3, but you're still very intrigued with as a prospect?
Ooh, that's a great question.
And I was going to say, like, Malik Washington's a day 2 guy now for me, but I'm into him. I think so. Maybe your thoughts on any other guys and kind of in that range.
Yeah, I'm looking. So let's see. We have, if everything plays out, we'll get 16, 17 receivers to go day 1, day 2, right?
Yep.
So guys right on that cusp for me, I'm looking at Jamari Thrash.
Okay.
I think a lot of people think he's a round 3 pick, but if he makes it to day 3, I think he could be a big splash. Jacob Cowing, Arizona receiver. Your guy Malik Washington, you just mentioned, I think that would be a great day 3 pick if he made it there. Now he might not. Some of these guys are going to have to, right? Brendan Rice, USC kid, like Jerry's son. I mean, shoot, he might not go day 2 just because of how deep this class is. Malachi Corley is another one. I know DJ has him in the top 50, which is a pretty good sign. He'll go day 1 or day 2, but all these guys, one of these guys is not going to be able to go on day 2. So I think any of those guys on day 3 would be a phenomenal pick.
Yeah, all those names are pretty exciting. It's such a deep class. I can't really recall a class where I was this excited about the depth. I know last year there was a ton of depth. Obviously, we had Tank Dell in the 3rd round. We had Puka Nacua, obviously going round 5, and those guys both crushed. And then we had a number of guys that were 6th round picks that actually had some fantasy friendly moments. You think of talk about like the Trey Palmers. Would you agree that the depth of this class is just outstanding compared to previous seasons?
Oh yeah, I mean last year was outstanding too, but yeah, this class is insane, just absolutely insane. I think overall this draft is not deep. I think when you're an NFL team trying to make the best moves for your team, like top 50 picks are going to be extremely valuable unless you need wide receivers or interior offensive linemen. You can get good wide receivers all the way into round 5 this year. I'm sure of it.
And then off a show sheet question, who is the first defender selected in the NFL draft?
Oh, that's a good one. I'll say one of the edge defenders, either Dallas Turner or Jared Verse. I'll take 2 there.
Okay, now we're done. Press coverage audience, don't worry, we're not talking defense. Let's dive into the tight ends here, guys. Besides Brock Bowers, Ja'Tavion Sanders. This was a guy that runs a 4.69 40. I was a little bit surprised. We talked about like Adonai Mitchell, where you see a guy like that, you never saw the speed. We saw the speed with Ja'Tavion Sanders kind of on film. Seemed like he was going to be a sort of like an upper level athlete tight end. For me, I still probably have him tight end 2 in the class. What are your thoughts on him as a prospect and your thoughts on basically his performance in Indianapolis?
Yeah, the speed was a little disappointing, right? I think sometimes what happens with his tape at Texas is like he's playing in space so much. Pardon me one second.
Sure.
So I'm getting over a bad case of the flu, like gnarly, sickest I've been as an adult. So I have to hit the cough button here and there. So what happens with Sanders is he's playing in space at Texas so much where he's catching a dump or a screen, and he just has the ability just to go, just, from standing still to just go. I think it makes him look maybe faster than he is. At least that's how I'm trying to justify it. I think he's good. I think, the question is, can he beat man coverage in the NFL? I think he can. I think he's got enough juice to do that. I think he'll match up well against linebackers if he gets the opportunity. As far as zone goes, I think he's got a good feel for beating zone. So he's still my tight end 2 for sure. The combine was definitely disappointing. The other thing with Sanders, I do think he's a good ball tracker and he's got good body control. He made a lot of catches over the middle where he had to jump or extend away from the ball and came down with it. That's not necessarily natural for a tight end. So I think he's good in all those regards, and he's great after the catch as well. So
2 players that have gained some steam, pretty much from the Senior Bowl through the combine. Theo Johnson, who had the unbelievable athletic testing numbers out of Penn State, and then Ben Sinnott, who was shockingly runs faster than Ja'Tavion Sanders in the 40. He has the highest vertical among all tight ends. He was a high ADOT guy at Kansas State this year. Interesting player, led Kansas State in receiving yards. Your thoughts on those 2 players, and do you see those guys both landing on day 2?
Yeah, so because of how much I value athleticism at the tight end position, Theo Johnson, inevitably, I feel better about him today for sure than I did last week. We kind of knew he was a good athlete, though. I mean, down at the Senior Bowl, for example, he was handling himself on one-on-one drills pretty well considering his size. That's actually a pretty good accomplishment. He's a big dude. So he is the prototype tight end in this class where, what is he, 262, I think he weighed at the combine?
Yeah, he was definitely 260 plus and 6'6", and runs in the 4.5s. Just wild stuff athletically.
Yeah, and Penn State's been doing this to us lately too. They've got quite the program there. So the problem with Theo, though, is just really unrefined skill set right now as far as receiving goes. And for tight ends, the first thing they're asked to do is beat zone coverage. And so, he's not good at that right now. He doesn't really quite understand or have a feel for attacking blind spots, attacking leverages appropriately. And it's something he can learn for sure. And, ultimately we'll bank on the athleticism meter. But, day 2 is definitely probably a slam dunk at this point because of the size and athleticism, I think teams will bet on that. He's a good blocker too, so that helps.
And then how about Ben Sinnott? Your thoughts on him as a prospect and draft capital wise?
Yeah, he was another one that really impressed me at the Senior Bowl, and I've been talking about him ever since. I didn't get exposure to his college tape until after the Senior Bowl. I did like a 2-game primer leading into it, just so I knew who he was. But man, he dominated the one-on-ones down there, Theo. Like, were you down there this year?
No, I have FOMO. I wish I went. A lot of people were like, "Where you at?" I have 3 kids that are young, so it's a little bit of a negotiation. I'm going to the NFL draft for like 5 days, so it was like a trade off. I have to justify one or the other.
I do this. I have 4 kids myself, so I do the trade off with my wife where I do Senior Bowl instead of Combine. I used to do Combine, so now I'm doing Senior Bowl. But anyways, yeah, Sinat was awesome at the Senior Bowl. He dominated the one-on-ones. He really stood out to me as like a guy who can be a pass catching weapon like right from day one. So and he playing at Kansas State, he definitely has a little bit of a grittiness to him. I think he can be an effective run blocker in space. Maybe not necessarily an inline blocker right away, but on split action, things of that nature, getting to the second level, I think he'll be effective in that regard.
Philosophical question when evaluating tight ends,
yeah.
And you could take this for other positions too. Do you give more weight to youth at certain positions? Because one knock on Sinat is he's older. And so you get a guy like Ja'Tavion Sanders is 20. Do you care at the tight end position about the relative age, or is it more of other factors?
No, I don't care too much. It's I definitely factor a little bit, but with the tight end position, like as long as your age and your development meet, then that's fine. So when I look at Sinat, he's an older prospect, but he's also a more developed blocker than most guys in this draft. He's a more developed route runner, so it makes sense. He would be a little older because he's a more developed player. So especially with tight end, it's such a steep developmental curve in the NFL. You know that. So
yeah,
having a guy that's already got some of those skills developed, I think is actually a good thing, not a bad thing.
Yeah, and I really like him. If you're drafting on Underdog right now, he's tight end 32. I think that's a really good bet to make because I think if a team takes him on day 2, this is a guy they're going to utilize in the passing game. He could have some spike weeks that will help us in best ball.
Yeah.
Let's do your top 5 at the tight end position, Brett.
Yeah, so I got Bowers number 1, Sanders number 2. I actually have Cade Stover number 3, Theo Johnson 4, and Ben Sinat number 5. Oh wait, hold on, I buried the lead. I actually have Jaheim Bell in my top 5.
Jaheim Bell is 5?
Yes, sorry about that.
Before I drop my rankings, the one other thing about Jaheim Bell is runs a 4.6, short. Do you think that this is we're going to adjust things based on the landing spot type deal when it's all said and done, or is it just like every other tight end, it's draft capital with your pre-draft evaluation?
Yeah, he is short in height, like 6'2.5", but he's got longer arms than Laporta and Brock Bowers. So I'm not sure that the height hurts him, but yeah, the NFL might not view it that simply. I'm not sure, but yeah, I mean, I think most tight ends are somewhat landing spot dependent. He's definitely going to be viewed as a pass or a receiver first kind of guy. Reminds me a little bit of Will Mallory last year.
Okay,
loved Will Mallory's game. I knew he wouldn't play a lot as a rookie because he was not good as a blocker. I think Jaheim Bell's probably going to be viewed the same way, where maybe we get him in some 12, 13 personnel packages to try to take advantage of some mismatches, but not going to be an every down player right away.
Quickly share your thoughts on Cade Stover. Better prospect than Jeremy Ruckert 2 seasons ago.
Yeah, I think so. I think he's just a little bit better in just every facet of the game. He's not an elite athlete, which is a bummer because we've already hammered that point a lot, but I think a favorable comp for him would be Jake Ferguson out of Dallas, where he's just not an exceptional athlete, but just does everything well. Really good inline blocker, really good blocker in space. And the reason I keep mentioning blocking, I know we're talking in terms of fantasy, is because to get on the field, you have to be at least serviceable as a blocker. So if a guy can't block at all, he's just not going to make it to the field, which means he's not helping you out in fantasy football. Stover is a great blocker, though. Really developed, good route runner, really, really, really savvy receiver over the middle of the field. Knows how to beat man coverage, really good ball tracking, contested catchability, all the stuff that's really important for tight ends to be high-level receivers. He's good at all that stuff.
No, definitely exciting stuff. My top 5 tight ends are Brock Bowers, Ja'Tavion Sanders, Ben Sinat, Theo Johnson, and I'll go Jared Wiley, who actually ran a very fast 40. I'm interested in him with his size. Okay, so we're going to go with our Superflex top 12 overall rankings. You're the guest, so I'll turn to you for your number 1 off the board in Superflex right now.
My number 1 off the board in Superflex.
I'll go first if you will. I'll go Caleb Williams as
I don't want to
one.
mess up the rankings because I'm weird with McCarthy.
No. Listen, you can go. We're not doing combined. You got to flag plant your own one. We're going side by side.
All right.
I'll go with Caleb Williams at the 101. Go ahead. Take your guy.
I'll go JJ. I'll go JJ.
Okay, so we get JJ McCarthy for Brett, Caleb Williams for me. 102, I will go Marvin Harrison Jr. I'll go with a wide receiver, despite the fact that there's good quarterbacks on the board.
I'm going to go Caleb Williams.
You do the pragmatic thing, going quarterback and super flex. I will go with the 103. I'll go with the God. This is a tough one. I'm going to go Jayden Daniels here at the 103.
I'm going to go Jayden Daniels also.
Okay, we go Daniels there. I'm going to go with the 104. I'm going to go with Malik Nabers at the 104.
I'm going to go Marvin Harrison Jr.
Okay, my 105 will be Drake Maye.
My 105 is going to be Rome Odunze.
And that's my 106. My 106 is Rome Odunze.
My 106 is going to be Drake Maye.
Okay, so we have just to recap the top 6 for Brett, JJ McCarthy, Caleb Williams, Jayden Daniels, Marvin Harrison Jr., Rome Odunze, Drake Maye. For me, Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison Jr., Jayden Daniels, Malik Nabers, Drake Maye, Rome Odunze. So I'm at the 107 right now. I am going to go with Brock Bowers.
I will go with Malik Nabers.
Okay, so we're in line almost, and I'm going to go with the 108. I'm going to take Brett's 101, JJ McCarthy at the 108. I get a big discount there.
Big discount. All right, 108. I'm going to go Brian Thomas Jr.
Okay, Brian Thomas Jr. is my 109 as well. I think he's my wide receiver 4 in this class. Back to you, Brett.
All right, my 109. Let's go. Yeah, we'll go Brock Bowers, 109.
Okay, Brock Bowers at the 109. And then for me at the 110, this is a difficult selection. I will take the first running back off the board. I will take the transcendent Trey Benson over a bunch of wide receivers I like better than him, just because I think he could land well and he could help me right away to win fantasy.
Nice. I don't disagree with you there. We're at 110, right?
110, yep.
We're at 110. I'm gonna go. Gosh, I hate myself for doing this, but I'm gonna go Xavier Worthy, just because I think draft capital is gonna get out of control with him, and then draft capital usually correlates decently well. So
yeah, I think he's gonna go inside the top 20. I think for sure he's gonna go inside the top 20 with that speed. The whole Kansas City at 32. Switch it up, people. You don't need to have the exact same mock draft. 111. I will go with Xavier Worthy at the 111, keeping it tight. Right back to you at your 111.
I'm gonna go Ladd McConkey.
Love that one. And then for me, I could go McConkey here. I could go Adonai Mitchell. I think I'm gonna go Ladd McConkey as well. Let's have the exact same 112. So, or excuse me, the exact same Ladd in the first round.
Yeah. My 112. This is gonna throw you off. I'm gonna go Bo Nix.
Okay, Bo Nix at the 112.
Yeah, I think he ends up in the top 15, and then he's a starter by end of year next year. So
awesome stuff. This was a lot of fun. Brett, let everybody know where they can find your work, what your Twitter handle is, anything else you want to promote.
Yeah, so at BG Whitefield on X/Twitter. You can find me there. I post a lot of videos, all 22 cut up, stuff like that, and my takes. I release a prospect guide on fantasypoints.com every year. I think first release is in 2 or 3 weeks. So when it's all said and done, you'll get over 200, draft write-ups. I do get into defensive players. I'm sorry, but it is what it is.
It's okay. We will forgive you. The IDP crowd, you know where to find Brett. I'm sure you're just as sharp on your defensive takes as you are your offensive takes. Highly recommend you check out Brett's work over at Fantasy Points. Check out his podcast appearances. Really, really does a great job with this class. Stick with us here at Press Coverage and check out my Dynasty-focused podcast on Dynasty Life. Curtis Patrick, Matt Hicks, Ian Miller. We've been having a bunch of really, really fun ones. I've got a lot of really good ones on tap next week as well. And then I'm going to be on the Game Plan with Matty Kiwoom this Saturday. Check it out right here on Player Profiler YouTube. Enjoy the rest of your week and enjoy the offseason.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.